and welcome back to my Road to 2400 videos. In this video I'm continuing with the post-mortem analysis of a tournament which I'm still currently doing. The first game of the tournament was covered in the previous video, which I won, so I'm on 1 out of 1 going into today. I played 2 games, one at 10 in the morning today and one at 3 PM. So for round 2, I'm playing against somebody who is lower rated than me, but they did win their first game as well against a higher rated opponent, so I can't underestimate them. I played e4 as white, they played c5, and knight f3 going into a Sicilian opening. And after knight c6, I spent a while thinking, because I wasn't certain whether I wanted to play d4 going into the main line Sicilian. I thought I may be able to trick them in the move order, or possibly just create an independent variation to try to get some sort of interesting middle game. So I went knight c3, and I'm kind of hoping that they do a unusual move here, maybe something like e5, for example, or b6. I'd be happy with those. They play a6. This move can easily transpose to a main Sicilian with my move d4. I wasn't confident playing bishop c4 yet, so I did transpose back into a mainline Sicilian. So normally here, black can play e5, I believe. e6 also is fine. g6 is slightly unusual, but it is a playable move, I believe. Knight f6, though, is the main move by quite a long way. So they play d6. This move isn't terrible. It's not the most popular move, but it does allow them to play e5 next turn, going into a mainline Sicilian. And I play bishop e3, which is fairly flexible as a move. Bishop e2 is also perfectly fine. Bishop c4 would be a kind of Bobby Fischer type move. He used to play bishop c4 in several Sicilian games. My opponent now goes g6, which does look normal at first because it appears to be setting up a Sicilian dragon. But with them having played d6, knight c6, and a6, and then fianchettoing, this move is slightly unusual. And also with the lack of them having played knight f6, we are now in an independent line. So I played bishop c4 to activate my pieces. I felt like activity was more important now than very, very slow moves like f3, which may allow them to eventually reach a position that you normally see in the opening. Bishop g7 is played by my opponent. I think that's a solid move. And I thought about castling kingside, straight away developing everything. But first I thought queen d2. This move is designed against moves like knight f6, because I constantly have this plan of playing bishop h6, which would trade off the dark squared bishops and slay the dragon. My opponent takes the knight. I'm really uncertain whether this is good, because it releases tension. It allows me to straight away offer the trade of bishops, and I felt like knight f6 was necessary here. Then I might be able to play a pawn storm with moves like f3, g4 if I want to. Knight d5 is a much simpler move I can play in the next few turns. And I can also now castle either side, and I must be good. The move e5 looks very, very dangerous, because for black they have a bit like a game I went over yesterday. There's this weak d6 pawn now, and the d5 square is available to a lot of white pieces. So I drop back. My opponent now has played too many pawn moves. I think to have any chance, moves like knight to e7, or maybe even knight f6 or bishop e6, trying to complete development, are needed. b5 was played. No good. Doesn't look like a natural move. And I kick off with bishop d5. Now things are truly horrible for black. By the way, if some of you looked at the move bishop takes f7 check, king takes f7, and you were thinking queen d5 check with a fork on the king and rook, winning it, this doesn't quite work because black does have bishop e6, defending their rook with the queen. Now white is significantly worse. So queen d5 might also be a move, but I don't really want to mess around with queen d5 because of things like bishop e6. Again, saving the rook in the same way. So bishop d5 to me made more sense. Rook b8. And rather stupidly, I just totally missed how to win the exchange. If any of you see it, well done, you did better than me. I should just play bishop a7. And for some reason I missed this. I instead decided that I would try to force black's king into a worse position by making them play things like king f8. If they block with the bishop, which they did in the game, that undefends their d6 pawn, so I can grab it. Black trades, trying to reach a position where they're not terribly worse, and they block. At this point, would you take the pawn on a6 or would you take the queen? Apparently taking the queen is not as good as taking the pawn. I was a bit nervous of taking the pawn just in case there was some kind of tactic later where my queen could get trapped. And I am losing time where they can quickly start deploying the rest of their pieces with moves like knight e7 and castles. So I didn't want any kind of worry, so I traded queens. I'm still a pawn up. I get to castle with check as well, forcing their king to move, which it did to e6. And here I need to develop my last piece, the h1 rook. So my plan was, I think fairly simple, double it up on the d file. There's only one open file, so I want both rooks there. Black brings out their knight. I do what I had planned, rook h d1, threatening checkmate on d6. f5 is chosen to get the king an escape square. Now, again, apparently I missed the best move. I should play rook d7 to pressure the knight. And rooks to the 7th are usually thematically very strong and practically very strong as well. So what I did instead was I checked to force their king to f7. Then I went to d7 with a pin. So I'm trying to pressurize the knight, attack the pinned piece. They defended, so I attack. Knight d5, continue with the pressure. Rook e8. I'm not ready to give up yet on the pin, so bishop c5 with a great deal of initiative. And things are starting to look absolutely horrible. My opponent plays a move which I don't think is any good. I don't know though if they're already lost. They went king to e6, and I've got two very good moves here. What would you play as white? The two moves I saw that looked very good, one is knight c7, check with a fork on king and rook. This also defends my d7 rook by getting the knight out of the way, so my two rooks are connected again. So black will lose at least the exchange, if not more. Instead, I chose rook d6 with a skewer, attacking the f6 bishop and king. They have to move back, and then I took check. My opponent threw in the towel and resigned because he's a piece down. In addition to that, also a pawn down, and white's pieces are very, very active, and I think there's not really much chance for black to fight back in this position. So that was the first game. I didn't play it perfectly by any means, but I thought I controlled things fairly well. I was never really in danger, and I gained 5 points for my my racing. So I'm now 23-27 going into the third game of the tournament, and I'm playing an FM. So his rating is apparently below mine, but that's only because he's played very few games on the Light Chess site. And in real life, he actually, I think last year, he played a lot of games. It might have been 30 or so. And he actually played me, and I did win this really complicated game. But he literally didn't lose any other games. He won a huge portion of his matches and drew a few with some very strong players. And he beat an IM that I know of. I think it might have been 2 IMs as well. So he's probably a very, very strong FM. Possibly IM strength already. So very good player. Not a junior though, so I'm not quite as nervous as I was in the first round. And also the fact I've beaten him before gave me some confidence. So we're having a Sicilian again. I thought I could fight and play aggressively. So he plays c3, I immediately shove in the centre Alapin style. Capture, queen captures. This opening does at first look bad for black because of the queen out early, but because black does have more space in the centre, having moved a pawn 2 squares forward and occupying with the queen, white doesn't have really a very good way of attacking the black queen yet, and I can use the space advantage to perhaps get equality. d4 is the move he chose, which is one of the main moves. I believe knight f6 is the most popular move here, but taking the pawn is also a move. I don't really like it because it helps white take back and then play knight c3, attacking our queen. e5 is also a move I've seen a lot. Again, I'm not entirely certain if e5 suits me, but it does definitely feature in a lot of games. I played the fourth move, knight c6. So this just develops a piece and it targets d4. Knight f3, defending d4. And I immediately go for initiative, bishop g4. So I'm aggressively fighting early on in the game. I think aggression works very well in chess. Even if it might not be the best move, you put psychological pressure on your opponents. And here, if he doesn't play very accurately, which of course he does, because he's a strong player, he could easily be worse quite soon. I mean, I'm already threatening to take on d4 and take the knight and take again on d4. So he does have to do something about that. He takes me. And even though queen takes pawn would restore the material to being equal, this is not something I like because my queen is getting kicked around a lot after moves like bishop to e3. So what I do is I play the main move, queen takes queen. King takes is forced. Now his knight is pinned. I've got e5, occupation of the centre. I'm perhaps going to go e4, attacking his pinned knight as well. I'm attacking his c5 pawn. And I've got better development. So he is already, I would say the position is equal, or dynamically equal, despite me being a pawn down. b4 is chosen, and just like some various other openings like the Slav, when black is the one who's taken a pawn and got this pawn structure, in the same way white does, I break straight away. This does target the b4 pawn. If white pushes b5, they've got too many weak pawns, especially the c5 one. And if they do nothing, I take on b4 twice. And if white goes a3, this is very suspicious because I can take, and their a pawn is pinned because of my rook. So taking on b4 doesn't really help them. I can take here. I'm sure there are other moves I can do as well. Possibly knight d4 is stronger, but this is just to illustrate that white often can't hold on to the pawn. So after a5, bishop b5 is chosen. Good move, I think. This does look a little bit strange, bishop b5. I mean, bishop e2 may be better. just giving me back the pawn but developing lots of pieces. Although it's a tough call. This is definitely a move which plays for a win. So I get out of the pin and... Oh, sorry, I don't do that yet. I get out of it in a couple of moves. First I go knight e7. So this is a move which I thought was quite sneaky. I think I might have seen a game of possibly David Howell where he had this position as well. Again, I don't remember everything, and it's possible I'm mixing up names of masters, but I'm sure I've seen a position where black played knight e7. The idea is that I want to play e4, but white had the move rook e1, which would have pinned my e4 pawn to my king. Now, because of the e7 knight, there's no pin, so e4 is an annoying move. It also will allow me to recapture on c6 with a knight if white chooses to take me. And that way I still pressure b4. And after white's next move, developing their knight, also stopping e4, first I take, just to kind of open things up a bit. I've got better development, so it makes sense to do this, I think. And I play a slightly unusual move. I castle. Even though my rook is quite good on the A file, I prefer pinning both white knights. Also, getting my king out of the pin, so my knight can now move. A3 was chosen, saving the b pawn. White is really wanting to hold the material, which looks very dangerous. E4. I'm going directly for his pieces. H3 I think was a good move, because now if I take the knight he takes me. But I take anyway, because after he essentially has to take back, I can take on g2 with initiative. I've now won the pawn back, got a very strong passed pawn on g2, so he will remove it. And instead of allowing him to just capture without any threats, I choose knight d4. So what this move does is it hits their bishop first, but it also has annoying threats of things like knight to f3 and knight to b3 and sort of constant pressure on white's position. And their king can't move from d1 to get out of any pins, because c2 and e2 are both covered, and if king to e1, knight to c2 check with a fork on the king and rook. My opponent plays bishop c4, targeting f5. To be honest, I don't really... sorry, f7 I mean. So I don't really care too much about the f7 pawn. This isn't really the key feature of the game. A lot of it is his king safety, is a big part of it, and also my initiative, which has now switched to the king side. H5. So my plan is, if he takes me, I'll take with the rook, and I can then play things like rook h1, which would really cripple his position. So he plays a sensible move, g5. He's closing up the h-file. But now my feeling is that I can just push. Got a strong passed pawn, supported by a rook. He takes my pawn, he has to now, or never. I push. He blockades with his rook. Now his pieces are very inactive. And even though knight f3 does look good at first, I thought that he could play rook h1, and then with my knight still on f3, his king could walk out of the pin. So first I improve my knight. I'm trying to play things like knight to f4 to support the pawn, and then knight f3, and I'm really crashing through. And the move I play a bit later also is another plan I have. Bishop e2 was chosen. I think stopping knight to f3 was his plan. And I play a move which, I mean, maybe it's not the best one, but I was seeing ideas of bishop g4 check, taking my pawn. I don't really want to give him those tempi. And if knight e5, which is what I was planning at first, there are slightly annoying moves like f4, where my knight then has to move and then bishop g4 works. So I thought first, just play sensible, get my king out of the checks. Rook a2 is chosen. This stops a lot of my kind of forks and pins and various tactics. So it's a sensible rook lift. Knight e5 is chosen by me, so I'm stopping bishop g4 now. because if f4, I was actually planning knight back to g6, attacking his pawn. Rook h1 was chosen, stopping any chance of me playing knight d4 to f3 with some kind of pin on his knight or discovered attack. And apparently when I looked at this game later, the move rook h4 is very, very strong, which stops his next move. So I did spend a while on this move. I couldn't find rook h4. It's obvious once I see it, but playing a rook lift like that I don't think is very obvious in this type of position. I felt like my bishop on f8 had not played a part, so I just played bishop e7 with a simple plan of taking the pawn and connecting my two rooks. Knight to e4. This is the move that I missed, and it's a very very dangerous looking move. You're now walking into so many discovered checks. But part of the reason for rook a1, rook a2 that was played a couple of turns ago, and rook h1 as well, is that my knight on d4 can't really attack anything. And if it takes the bishop, his king just takes it. So in the end, I couldn't see a good discovered attack, so I played h2, trying to, again, sort of press my advantage and use the monstrous pawn to get the win. Bishop e3 was chosen, by, going back one move, bishop e3 was chosen by him. He's trying to trade pieces. So I felt like now was the only time I could use knight f5 check, trying to trade his bishop off, trying to arrange him to blunder, which he doesn't. And I just couldn't see a way through. This was very frustrating. So in the end, I chose to play boring, and then rook h4. So I found it now when after it could have made a difference. This move is just intending to win g5 by forcing their knight to move. And they trade rooks. Save their knight. I take. And I missed this move, knight f1. Surprisingly annoying. Attacking h2. I hadn't looked at that. So I spent a while here and thought that maybe if I can take on e3 after they take on h2, things will be fine. And if I do take on e3 and they take on h2, I'm going to have two passed pawns, so I may as well push them. King d2 was chosen. This does protect e3, so I play f4. I'm hoping they take me. I take back with the bishop and I guard the h2 pawn. I could also take with the rook with discovered checks coming into play. Rook takes h2, f takes e3 check. Now they could blunder horribly. I don't think he would, because he's a very strong player and has a lot of time on his clock, 34 minutes to be exact. But yeah, if their knight takes my pawn, it's no longer guarding their rook, so it would be deflected away. King d1, very sensible move. Rook takes, knight takes, and it's around here that I offer a draw. I actually offered a draw very early, about move 10, just to see if I could, get the draw with a stronger player than me, or higher rated player than me. And I offered it again, because we're on opposite coloured bishop endings. I mean, okay, my pawns are a bit weaker than his, because they're all isolated, but I don't think I should lose. King c2 is chosen. And here I did play a little bit dangerously. I thought I had a draw, and I played knight d4, and traded, because the knight is really far away from his pawns, and my bishop can cover e3 and also swing round to attack his pawns as well. So usually in these open positions, bishops are better than knights. But I saw that he could be annoying and play moves like b5 at some stage, and then a4 and sort of king c4 and try and hold his position. So I saw a way to trade a set of pawns with b6, which at first is counterintuitive. If he takes me, I can play king b7, and he can't save the b6 pawn. And then with that few pawns, I should easily draw this game. I should, doesn't mean I will. Knight f3 was chosen by him, so I played bishop f6. Domination of the knight. He can't move forwards with it. So he wins a pawn. Again, I'm fairly confident I should draw this, but I missed knight d4. I planned to go bishop b2 and then attack the pawns from behind. where I should eventually be able to either blockade them and keep constant pressure on the pawns, eventually just drawing, or he'll push his pawns a bit too far and I might be able to sacrifice my bishop for both of them. But knight d4 really annoys me, so I can't move my king anywhere closer to the pawns, so I play g5. It seems to be one of my only moves. And then he has the problem of having to stop my passed pawn. He either has to bring his knight to sort of hang out on maybe g3 or g2, and then my bishop and king should overpower his solitary king, having to guard the pawns. If he uses the king to blockade me and take my pawn, then my bishop and king should be able to overpower the knight. So he played a4. He doesn't really want to move the knight or move the king. I keep pushing, so I have nothing else to do. Knight f5, which is one of the necessary moves he had to play. And this now does draw. Bishop c3. b5, so he's saved the pawns, and again I overpower them. I have to be a little bit careful. I spent a few seconds calculating this, just making sure that I wasn't blundering my way into a loss. After king takes a4, b6, what's I think my only drawing move? So I need my bishop to be able to get to b8. If I run with my king, it's way too slow. So moves like bishop to e1, it potentially draws, but I didn't want to kind of come around in the more difficult way. I thought that they could play a move like possibly knight to e6 or something, and then I'm potentially losing, because if bishop g3, then knight f4, and it blocks my bishop. So I played bishop a5, which looked much, much simpler. b7, and then bishop c7 just in time. And their king is too slow, so my own king can run after their pawn. QED. He promotes to a knight just for fun. If king d5, I just in time get king b6. He will lose the pawn next turn. And if he does some other bizarre move like knight to b3, he still, he can't save the pawn because I just take the knight. So he's too slow. Even if somehow he got that position, I couldn't take him, and we repeat moves or something. So like this. I can't take the pawn, but now I push the other one. So again, his knight's going to have to come around to stop me promoting. And now, things are a bit harder for him. He will probably still draw the match as long as he doesn't throw away the draw. But yeah, there's no way to protect his pawn, which is his last chance to win. So he promotes to a knight. I take it. Knight c6 with a fork. King a4, just a random king move. And then his king is easily in time to catch my pawn and draw. So I wasn't too upset with the draw. He's a very strong player. He's an FM. So also with the draw, I am still at least in second place. There were, I think, maybe 6 people who were on 2 out of 2 going into round 3. So obviously 2 of them are me and him, and we both drew the match. So that means there's 2 other games going, and assuming both games end in a win, that means there'll only be 2 players on 3 out of 3 with 2 rounds left to go. So if I win the last 2 games, I should maybe come joint first, or maybe first outright would be nice. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. Overall, I gained 5 points for the first game, and I lost 4 for this draw. So I gained 1 point over 2 games. So with this, averaging about 1 point per match, or half a point per match, I just need to play another 75 games or so, and I will eventually get to 2400 at this rate. Alright, see you next time. Bye.